Welcome to our information video on growing Crocosmia. At Trecanna Nursery down in Cornwall, we grow a host of different Crocosmia down here, and they range in height from 18 inches up to 6 foot. They offer colour in the border right the way through from the end of June to the middle of September, so they're fabulous plants for the border. They grow from a little corm that multiplies away beneath the ground, and there are many different forms to look at. They have a number of different benefits. First, their flowering time. They're going to flower in the middle of the summer when most of the border plants have actually come to an end. So rather than having a border full of green shoots and green leaves, you can have some fabulous colours growing away. Also, they're salt tolerant, wind tolerant, rabbits don't eat them, deer don't eat them. They're fairly foolproof plants, so they're well worth having in the border. First, I'm going to talk about the range of different Crocosmia that you can actually find growing in the border. They all originally from South Africa, where there are 7 different species on the mainland of South Africa and 1 in Madagascar. I guess the one that we know most of in this country is this one here, and it hasn't earned itself a good reputation. This is what we know by the common name of Montbretia. It's a cross between 2 of the South African species, and it forms a wonderful plant with these gorgeous orange flowers, but it does run riot right the way through the border, and it's one that you need to be a little bit careful of in a smaller garden. But we actually offer over 200 different varieties of much better behaved clump forming varieties which are better for the border. I'm just going to run through the range of colours first of all. This one here is one of our yellows. This is a pale yellow one called Mount Usher. Quite a low growing plant, just grows to about 2 foot high, and they really range through from the softest yellows at the starting point for most of the colours that you can pull together. Then you move on to the oranges. Here's one of the oranges. This is a large flowered one called Constance, a good upright form with flowers which get up to about 2.5 inches across, so well worth growing in the border, that one. And then moving on to the reds, then I guess the one that most people know is this one here. This is the deep red Lucifer, a fabulous plant, forms quite a tall clump in the border, about 4 foot to 5 foot high, and as you can see, these gorgeous tomato red flowers. But there are other colours as well that you can look at. This one over here is one of the softer coloured forms, so they don't have to be bright red, yellow and orange. This is a sort of a salmon apricot one called Seven Sunrise with a yellow throat, a beautiful cluster headed form. Or if you can't decide on any of those, then there are multicoloured options. This is a wonderful one called Bicolour, and here you can see red, yellow and orange all on the same flower. So there's quite a good range of different colours to choose from. In addition to looking at the flower colour though, you can also look at the shape of the flower, and these come in a number of different forms. Just like Lucifer, which is an arching form, this one here is Tamar Glow. You see these arching stems which come across anything up to 30 flowers held on a stem, which first goes upwards and then bends downwards as it reaches the end. And the flowers are held side by side as they grow off. This one here is Tamar Glow. It's one of the red hybrids that we've bred here at Trecanna. It's a much larger flowers than Lucifer and quite an impressive plant. In addition to that, you can get cluster flowered forms. Here's one called Okavango, which has salmon flowers, and here you can see whilst it's got that arching, the flowers are much more tightly clustered together. And then you come to the downward facing hybrids. This one here, you've got R.W. Wallace and Star of the East, and if you have a look, those flowers are actually facing downwards. If you see a Crocosmia with downward facing flowers, it's often a good sign that it'll succeed in part shade as well as full sun. But just look at the size of the flowers on them, they're quite gorgeous, aren't they? That's R.W. Wallace, that one there. And then finally, if I'm trying to group them, I guess there are 1 or 2 which often get overlooked, which have these very fine tubular flowers. You can just see the length against my fingers here of the flowers on these, and these are closely related to some of the species that grow in the wild. The length of that flower is exactly the same shape as the beak of a malachite sunbird, and to pollinate it in the wild, that beak reaches right the way down to the bottom and gets its reward of nectar. And they're quite different to the others. I think they're very architectural, these ones, as they go along. So those are the different colour forms and the different colour types that you can actually find growing away. So how do you plant the Crocosmia once you actually bought them? This is a Crocosmia growing in one of our small pots. So when you come to planting it in the border, gently tap it out, remove the pot. There's some good roots growing on there at the moment. Pull the label away for a moment. Now when you're going to plant this in the border, dig a good deep hole, dig in plenty of compost, some grit underneath if your soil is not that well drained, and a handful of bone meal or another long-lasting organic feed just sprinkled in the base of the hole. And then your aim is to plant the Crocosmia with the corms about 4 inches deep. So the corm is down here, so you actually want to plant it much deeper than it is in the pot, probably to about this level. Plant it in. One of our little pots will form a cluster in a few years, or you could cluster 2 or 3 tight together if you want to form more of an instant clump. Once they're actually in the ground and they're planted down at this sort of depth, finish it off with a layer of bark or other compost on the top. That'll just help to cap the moisture in once they're growing away, and also it'll help to protect them from any cold in the winter. So that's a really good trick to sort of start to get things going. Once they're planted, then really aftercare is fairly simple. You can just leave them in place from year to year. In the autumn months, that's the time when you can actually start to snip back some of the old flowered stems on there. The old leaves I tend to leave in place over the winter months, and as they die back, they form an excellent layer of protection over the winter. So if it's a cold winter, they'll actually insulate the new shoots that come through from underneath the ground. In the spring, offer a little bit of bone meal into the ground, just finger it into the surface, and that'll give them the boost that they need. There are many different plants that you can plant with your Crocosmia, and some of them we can have a look at here. Many of these flower at the same time and grow away, and here's just a few that we grow in our borders alongside them. Of course, agapanthus, again they're South African, and they grow very well, similar conditions, so they enjoy growing away. Here we have one of the gladiolus. This is a wonderful one called Gladiolus papilio ruby, and this actually flowers at exactly the same time with these lovely ruby red flowers, and again it grows from a corm that multiplies up. We like to use verbena with many of the Crocosmia. The colours just work well. This is a lower growing form called Homestead Purple, or just around the back here we've got a taller growing one. This one grows up to about 5 to 6 foot high. This is Verbena bonariensis, and both these work superbly well with growing in the border with our Crocosmia. Other partners, possible partners, include things like red hot pokers, or here we have a wonderful pineapple lily, another of our specialities, Eucomis, another South African plant, or other summer flowering perennials. Here is a Coreopsis with these beautiful daisy-like flowers. Now all of these you can see in our borders, and they all blend very well, and they all work superbly well when you're growing them away. Finally, just a few tips on propagation. Crocosmia readily produce seed. They don't tend to self-seed in the border. They tend to need a little bit of nurturing, so if you have some seed forming, look out for it as the flower head finishes. This is a little early here, but you can just see the seed heads starting to form along the base of the stem. Wait until the seeds are opening up, the seed cases are opening up, and you can see the seeds there. Gather them in, either sow them straight away into pots of seed compost, or wait until the following spring. But you won't end up with the same variety. It's usual that after 3 or 4 years they'll come into flower, and as they come into flower, then the variety the seedling that comes out is unlikely to be exactly the same as your parent. You never know, it may come out as being a different sort of variety altogether. The alternative to gathering seeds is to divide your clumps in the autumn, and that's good practice. So let's go into the border now and see how you divide them in the autumn. In the autumn, your Crocosmia are going to start to die back. You can see here, this is a clump that I've just dug up from the border. You can see the leaves are starting to die back and the flowers have finished. So this clump has been in the border for about 3 or 4 years now, and every 3 or 4 years there's a real benefit in actually removing the clump in the autumn and then cutting it back and dividing it and replanting. So what I'm going to do is just chop back the old flower stems on here and the old leaves. It makes it easier to work with. Leave the base of the leaves in place, because over the winter that'll add a little bit more protection as it goes along. And then you can divide these clumps in the spring or the autumn, but I find that the autumn is better. If you look under the ground at this time of the year, the new shoots for next year, they're just starting to come through. If you leave that too long in the spring, these shoots become long and they become damaged as you divide the clump. So to do it in the autumn is always the benefit, but if you run out of time, then go ahead and do it in the spring. Just once you've got your clump apart, then it takes a little bit of effort here really, just to really prise the clump apart, being as gentle as you can with those shoots, and you can start to form yourself some new clumps ready to plant. I think a clump like this I'd probably divide into 2 or 3. There we go, that's a good sized clump there. Remove some of the dead shoots from around the side, and then the important thing is you can see here that these corms have worked their way to the surface over the years. They're only maybe an inch below the surface now. When you replant this in the ground, replant it a good 3 or 4 inches deeper than it was before, and by doing that you're getting the corms down to a good depth. Good handful of bone meal, plenty of compost around, and off you go. And you can divide this into 3 or 4 clumps, maybe give one clump away or plant in different areas of the border. By doing this, you'll actually get more flowers year after year. If you just leave the clump to extend, gradually the flowering will go down, and this is good practice. I hope you found this video on growing Crocosmia useful, and I hope you enjoy growing them in the garden. We do have a printed sheet on our website, which is www.trecanna.com, or you can call us and we're happy to chat to you, or you can visit the nursery and see them all growing away here in the border. I hope you enjoy growing your Crocosmia.